She wasn't supposed to be the star. When Bad Chad Customs first roared onto screens, the spotlight was clearly aimed at the outrageous builds, the blown engines, the sparks flying in the garage, and of course, Chad Hiltz himself. But somewhere between the chaos, the noise, and the late-night deadlines, viewers began noticing someone else. Someone quieter. Someone grounded. Someone real. That someone was Jolene Macintyre. Jolene didn't enter the world of reality TV chasing fame. There was no manufactured drama, no over-the-top persona. What made her stand out was exactly the opposite. She felt familiar, relatable, like the calm presence in a room full of fire. While the show revolved around extreme car builds and even more extreme personalities, Jolene became the emotional anchor, the human heartbeat behind the madness. From the early days of Bad Chad Customs, Jolene was seen supporting the business, holding things together when pressure mounted, and standing beside Chad through both victories and disasters. Cameras often caught her in unguarded moments, listening more than speaking, steady when things went wrong, and visibly invested in the dream they were building. Viewers didn't need confessionals or dramatic music cues to understand her role. Her presence spoke for itself. And that's why audiences connected so deeply with her. In a genre often criticized for being loud and artificial, Jolene felt authentic. She represented the unseen side of ambition, the partners who sacrifice, support, and absorb stress without applause. Fans began rooting for her not because she demanded attention, but because she never did. As the show grew, so did her following. Social media comments filled with praise, concern, and admiration. People didn't just watch Jolene, they felt her. They saw someone navigating love, loyalty, pressure, and public exposure all at once. She became a symbol of quiet strength in a world obsessed with noise. But what made Jolene's rise truly compelling was the contrast. Behind the success of the show, behind the growing fanbase and expanding brand, there were signs, subtle at first, that everything wasn't as solid as it appeared. The smiles sometimes lingered too long. The silences felt heavier. The weight of fame, responsibility, and personal struggle began to show in small, easily missed moments. At the height of Bad Chad Customs, Jolene Macintyre wasn't just part of a TV show anymore. She had become a public figure people cared about deeply, whether she asked for it or not. And as her visibility grew, so did the pressure. Because sometimes, the most heartbreaking stories don't begin with scandal or collapse. They begin with love, loyalty, and a dream that slowly becomes too heavy to carry. Success came fast, and from the outside, it looked intoxicating. Bad Chad Customs wasn't just a TV show anymore. It was a brand, a lifestyle, a non-stop machine fueled by deadlines, expectations, and cameras that never truly shut off. The shop buzzed with attention. Fans showed up. Opportunities multiplied. And with that rise came a version of life few people are prepared for. For Jolene Macintyre, this new reality was complicated. On paper, it was everything people dream about. Financial stability that once felt impossible. Recognition from strangers who felt like friends. A business that went from scrappy survival mode to national exposure. But behind the scenes, the high life came with invisible costs, especially for someone who never sought the spotlight in the first place. As the show's popularity exploded, the line between personal life and public entertainment began to blur. Arguments became content. Stress became story. Private moments suddenly belonged to an audience. Jolene wasn't just living her life anymore, she was living it under constant observation. The pressure inside the shop grew just as intense. Long hours, tight budgets, high-stakes builds that could make or break reputations. When things went wrong, they didn't just fail quietly, they failed on camera. And while Chad carried the weight of being the face of the brand, Jolene absorbed the emotional fallout that rarely made it into the final edit. Fans often saw her as the stabilizer, the one keeping things grounded. But stability doesn't mean invincibility. Over time, the cracks began to show in subtle ways. Fatigue, emotional distance, moments where the spark seemed dimmer than before. Fame magnified everything. Success felt louder, but stress felt heavier too. There was also the unspoken role Jolene played, managing relationships, smoothing conflicts, and quietly protecting the business from collapsing under its own intensity. It's a role many partners take on without realizing how much it drains them. You don't get applause for being the emotional backbone. You just keep going until you can't. Viewers sensed it. Comments shifted tone. Where there was once admiration, there was now concern. People noticed the change not in dramatic breakdowns, but in energy, posture, and presence. Jolene still showed up, but something had shifted beneath the surface. The high life had delivered everything it promised: fame, attention, success. But it had also taken something in return. Because when your identity becomes tied to a public image, and your private struggles are played out under studio lights, the cost isn't measured in money or ratings. It's measured in emotional exhaustion. And as the pressure continued to build, it became clear that the story of Jolene Macintyre was no longer just about success. It was about survival. At first, the cracks were easy to ignore. A tense exchange here, a long pause there, a moment where Jolene's expression said more than any words ever could. Reality television has a way of disguising real pain as drama, and for a long time, that's exactly what many viewers assumed they were seeing. But behind the scenes, the pressure was mounting in ways cameras couldn't fully capture. As Bad Chad Customs grew bigger, so did the expectations. Not just from fans or producers, but from the brand itself. Deadlines became brutal. Financial risks became larger. Every build carried the weight of reputation, income, and public judgment. When something went wrong, there was no quiet failure, only loud criticism from an audience that felt entitled to opinions. And Jolene was standing in the middle of it all. While Chad often took the heat publicly, Jolene carried a different burden: emotional responsibility. She wasn't just supporting a partner. She was helping hold together a business, a public image, and a relationship under relentless strain. That kind of pressure doesn't explode all at once, it erodes slowly. Then came the speculation. Fans began to ask questions. Was everything okay between them? Why did Jolene seem more withdrawn? Why did the tension feel heavier than before? Online discussions picked apart episodes frame by frame, assigning narratives to moments that were deeply personal. What viewers called on-screen chemistry or attitude shifts were, in reality, fragments of a much bigger struggle. The hardest part? Jolene didn't get to process any of it privately. Every rumor, every comment, every assumption added another layer of stress. Social media, once a place of support, became a minefield. Praise and criticism lived side by side, and even well-meaning concern could feel overwhelming when you're already stretched thin. Reality TV rarely shows the aftermath, the quiet moments when the cameras leave, and the emotional weight finally settles in. Jolene was navigating identity loss, burnout, and personal strain while still being expected to smile, show up, and keep things running smoothly. And when the relationship itself began to fracture, it didn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It happened gradually through emotional distance, exhaustion, and the realization that love alone isn't always enough to survive constant pressure. The public saw controversy. Jolene lived through collapse. What made it even more heartbreaking was her silence. She didn't lash out. She didn't fuel rumors. She withdrew, protecting herself in the only way she knew how. But in the world of fame, silence is often misread as guilt, weakness, or indifference. In reality, it was the sound of someone reaching their limit. Because when the spotlight burns too bright for too long, even the strongest people begin to crack. And soon, Jolene Macintyre would face the moment that changed everything, one that no edit, no storyline, and no fan theory could soften. By the time the public realized something was truly wrong, the story had already shifted behind closed doors. The separation didn't arrive with fireworks or a dramatic announcement. There was no single episode that explained everything. Instead, Jolene Macintyre seemed to slowly fade from the world she helped build. Fewer appearances, less visibility, and then absence. For fans who had followed her journey from the beginning, the silence was unsettling. Speculation rushed in to fill the gap. Some assumed it was simply a breakup under pressure. Others blamed fame, money, or creative differences. But those explanations felt too small for what people sensed was a much deeper collapse. Because what Jolene was facing wasn't just the end of a relationship, It was the unraveling of an identity that had been shaped around support, loyalty, and sacrifice. When your life becomes intertwined with a brand, a show, and a public narrative, walking away isn't just emotional, it's disorienting. Jolene wasn't stepping back into a normal life. She was stepping into uncertainty, grief, and the loss of a future she had invested years into believing in. And she did it without a spotlight. There were no tell-all interviews, no public accusations, no attempts to control the narrative. In an era where visibility equals power, Jolene chose something far harder: privacy. That decision, while healthy, came at a cost. Silence allowed rumors to grow unchecked. And the internet, as it often does, mistook quiet healing for something darker. But those close to the situation understood something important. Jolene wasn't disappearing. She was surviving. Leaving a high-pressure, highly public life doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like grief. It feels like rebuilding from scratch while the world watches from a distance, asking questions you don't have the energy to answer. Jolene was untangling herself from years of emotional labor, public expectation, and constant stress work that happened slowly, painfully, and mostly unseen. And yet, within that fall, there were signs of reinvention. Small steps toward reclaiming herself. Distance from the chaos. A deliberate refusal to be defined by controversy or collapse. Jolene wasn't chasing another spotlight, she was choosing peace. And for someone who spent years being the emotional backbone for others, that choice was quietly revolutionary. But the hardest part of reinvention is that it doesn't come with applause. There's no dramatic comeback montage. Just long nights, hard realizations, and the slow work of becoming someone new, someone whole.